There's a dark truth to Scotland's forests. Whether if you're walking on the hill or driving, you see patches of forests almost everywhere. Dark evergreen trees. Sometimes these form in quite small blocks, and other times they really look quite extensive. And it would be easy to look at these trees, these forests, and say, isn't that beautiful? Isn't that great? Trees, they're so integral to nature, life, and the functioning of ecosystems. Scotland sure has a lot of them. And while this might be the case, the reality is that not all trees and not all forests are made equal. To properly understand this, we're going to have to take a journey back in time, 6,000 years ago. Humans back then would have encountered a very different Scotland to what we see today. The Highlands, well, they would have been covered in a vast forest. The great Scots pine and birchwoods would be aligning the loughsides and climbing the hills. And up on the mountains you'd see scrubby, low-lying, weather-beaten wind-formed trees. And this primary forest habitat which I've been describing is Caledonian pine forest. We think that this habitat once covered 1.5 million hectares in Scotland. That is such an extensive range. For context, that's about 1.5 million football pitches, more or less. But however, it's still not exempt from the odd strongbow can. This one's coming home with me. Isn't it crazy to think that such an expansive habitat has now been reduced by 97%? Just 3% remain. And that 3% which does remain, it's not this like intact, thriving, healthy little reserve. It is fragmented, it's chopped up, and it's stressed. All throughout Scotland you find Caledonian pine forest in different shapes and forms. Arguably the most degraded is when you see those like single stems, those like, well, they're dead, you know, they're just a relic of the forest which would have stood there. And then on from this is where you have like a single age, like really old pines with nothing else growing around them because nothing can regenerate around them. And then you have places like where I am now. This is Glen African. Here the native forests are coming back, and what really shows that it is a place that's in recovery is that you have Scots pine, you have birches, you have all of these native trees coming up at different ages. You have really old mature trees, you have slightly like younger ones, then you even have like little seedlings which are popping up. Scotland has so many awesome native trees, whether it's like oak dominated forests or if it's aspen stands, or actually just over there is a wonderful wych elm tree which I had the pleasure of meeting the other day. And of course the little rowans which are just looking fantastic this time of year in autumn. Those berries sure do look tasty. I don't think you can eat them straight off the tree. But what about those evergreen pointy blocks of trees? Well, I think it's time that we go and explore one. Unfortunately we're going to have to leave here, and it's time to reveal their dark truth. These green forests which you see all over Scotland, these are non-native conifer plantations. We've put them here, we've planted them like this, so close together that there is absolutely no understory, not like in the Caledonian pine forest. And the trees themselves, all of the lower branches are completely dead because there is absolutely no light coming through. These monocultures are the tree equivalent of intensive agriculture. It really is no different. Ecologically it is terrible, economically, well, you know, we'll discuss that in a minute. It really does make you ask the question, how can any life persist in these landscapes? And well, I've just found a clue of a very special tree which I want to show you now. This absolutely immense oak tree here, I think this is one of the best depictions of the struggle which Scotland's native forests are facing against these non-native plantations. This oak tree should be the tallest tree in its ecosystem, but it's just completely towered over by these non-natives. I visited this tree a couple of times, and every time I see it, my breath is just taken away at just how immense it is. As a standalone thing, if you take away all of these conifers, this tree's just incredible. I mean, it is such a huge tree. I don't even know what the diameter is on this thing, but it's going to be incredible. And like the layers of life on it, just like look at the intricacies of the wood, look at the layers of lichens and mosses. Oh man, and like this branch coming down here, completely dead. The branch itself is supporting, I think that's Sitka, non-native. Look at these mushrooms, look at this fungus growing on it. And just up there at the top of the main stem, it looks like there's like a little ecosystem forming. You know, it's just such a visually striking and beautiful tree. Now, you might be wondering, you know, why are non-natives bad in a native ecosystem? You know, they're not always terrible, but I think it's fair to say that the native species, like an oak, are always going to support so many more species because they've evolved together, whether if it's invertebrates, whether if it's other plant life. Non-natives really don't have much of a place, especially not when they're planted like this. This is the other problem with them, is how they're planted. And how do you make these plantations better? Well, I've actually seen quite a few ways. See, if you just have like a complete Sitka forest, you're probably better off felling it and starting again. Clear fell sites can look like a bomb has gone off, and while they look like that in the short term, in the long term, you'll be allowing the natives to come back. And places like this, where you've had an oak tree like this just underplanted with these, clearly what you want to do is take down the non-natives and allow the natives space to just breathe and come back. But it's also pretty common throughout Scotland to find, you know, the Scots pine trees which we saw making up the beautiful Caledonian pine forest. Well, it's also pretty common to find these planted in plantations, but the same problem arises is that they are in just monocultures. So what you do here is you actually start taking out a few. Like the guys at Planet Wild, what they've been doing is they've actually been tying chains to them and literally winching them down to simulate like a pretty violent storm. They're breaking down parts of the forest, so it just creates a little bit of chaos. You know, the wilder, the more chaotic an ecosystem is visually, and probably like audibly as well. If there's all kinds of sounds going on, trees crashing down, wolves howling, like just the more chaotic an ecosystem is, the healthier it's going to be. And Planet Wild aren't just restoring nature here in Scotland, they're now doing it all over the world. They're crowdfunding for nature. It's a nature conservation organisation that offers a paid membership for people who care about our planet and want to protect and restore biodiversity. And each month they partner with a different organisation to protect endangered species, support oceans and rewild landscapes, as they're doing here in Scotland. They have a great diversity of projects which are backed by their thousands of members. Regular people who want to come together and see nature return. Since not everyone can help on the ground, Planet Wild allows members to make a difference from their own home. With your membership, you'll support a new mission each month and actually see what your contribution helped achieve, since it's all documented in their YouTube channel and app. As a member, you are free to give whatever amount feels right, big or small. Every effort counts in protecting nature. So the first 150 people to sign up to Planet Wild using the link down in the description and in the comments, you'll get your first month of membership paid for by me. So it's free. You can start now signing up to restore nature. And if you want to cancel anytime, you can do that. I'm just really proud to be partnering with Planet Wild because I know that when we come together, we're going to have a much bigger impact. Ultimately, we do need forestry, but it's pretty clear that it can be done better for nature. Instead of random blocks throughout the landscape, there can be more strategy in creating networks. And native species like Scots pine can be used more and at a more natural planting density. It's pretty important to remember that all of these plantations that we see throughout Scotland, they've been inherited, and it will take decades to see any real change. There's a saying in Scotland, and these aren't my words, but it's that here, poor timber is grown very well, with a lot of it going to low-grade uses like wood chip, pallets and paper. And paper is actually a really interesting one because globally around 30 to 40% of timber is grown in order to produce paper. Now, how many of these Scottish forests actually end up being paper? I don't know exactly, but you can probably bet that it's quite a high bit. If you work in forestry and you have like a good understanding of this, then please let me know down in the comments. But there's actually a much better plant which is circling in the news at the minute, and I just want to talk about it for a minute. Hemp is actually a really interesting and quite useful plant which we're just not using a whole lot of now in modern society. Actually, here in Scotland, there's been quite a bit of research gone into how it could be incorporated back into the Scottish landscape. That's right, incorporated back into, because thousands of years ago, this was a plant which we would use and cultivate. Hemp, you know, in the context of making paper, is far superior than using trees. It has much stronger fibers, and actually not just paper. Hemp can be used for clothing, it can be used for, you know, like construction materials, it can be used, you can even eat hemp. It also grows crazy fast, and it doesn't take up that much space for all of the good that it can do. But hemp has kind of taken on this kind of unfavorable view, because certain forms of it can be like a psychoactive drug, and I think that's why we're just not seeing it used a great deal now. There's a whole conspiracy on this, and look, I'm not getting into this. I'm not meaning to go off on a tangent about hemp, but my point is that if we're gonna use plants as a resource, why not, you know, do it better? Why not think differently? I mean, hemp certainly wouldn't outgrow this tree. You know, you could probably have hemp growing as an understory plant. You know, it wouldn't just tower over and dominate a landscape. Dominate such an amazing tree. Let's just go and appreciate this tree a little bit more. Look at this like little cavity going in here. Wow, if you were like a little mammal or something, you just want to like nook up in there for the winter. That looks perfect. If you want to learn more stories about nature restoration, then please subscribe to Leave Curious, and if you want to start contributing to nature restoration projects, have a look at what Planet Wild can offer you. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Leave Curious. What a tree.